Hello, everyone. I hope you're all doing fine. It's a great pleasure to be with you again for this second marketing reboot. And I'm very glad to co-present this today with Lucy May and Greg.
Hello,
How are you,
Thibaut.
Lucy May?
Hello, Thibaut. Happy to be here today.
Great to be here.
Great.
Thanks.
Thanks for being here. We decided today that we would cover a second topic after talking, you might remember, about attitudes in marketing and the role of attitudes in shaping behaviors. Today, we wanted to talk about the great marketing minds in the field of marketing and what do they have to tell us about the current crisis. So as you know, marketing reboots is always an opportunity to go back to the fundamentals of academic marketing, which are very powerful tools. And so going back to the very roots of marketing is especially interesting in the current crisis. And we thought we could look at some of these great marketing minds and see what they have to tell us, what they can tell us about what is going on today. So the first marketing mind we wanted to touch on is Jean-Baptiste Say, a French economist, who in the 18th century, end of the 18th century, actually came up with an important theory, the theory of, and the law, he called it the law of outlets, la loi des débouchés. So Jean-Baptiste Say was an economist, and you might read here his saying. He said, Jean-Baptiste Say said, yes, I know it's complex. He said, in order to encourage industry, it is not just about simple consumption. It is necessary to encourage the development of tastes and needs that make people want to consume. Just as in order to encourage sales, it is necessary to help consumers enjoy benefits that make them ready to buy. So for him, the difficulty lies not in finding a producer, he says, but in finding a consumer. So that's really interesting because basically his law was that supply could create demand. And so we can see here that there is some kind of definition of what marketing could be already. And this obviously dates back from over 200 years ago. So we thought it was a nice way to start. And maybe Greg and Lucy, maybe you can give us some more recent dates and critical moments in the field of marketing.
For sure. Thanks, Thibaut. And yes, indeed, if we go back in time, marketing as a concept has existed for long, as Jean-Baptiste said, but the term marketing first appeared in 1960. So marketing celebrates, in a way, its 60th anniversary in 2020. And marketing is actually quite recent discipline, but in reality, we do find marketing concepts before this date, as you can see on the timeline here. And as an example, we can cite the Green Stamps program in the US. In 1896, the first program combining earn, burn, and rewards. In other words, probably the very first loyalty program in the world. And interestingly, we observe that some great innovations in marketing emerge in economic high times. It could be crises, recessions, but also recoveries. And I think the 1929 crisis is a good example of this, with the creation of panels in the USA, with the creation of Nielsen, to name it, to enable pharmacies and retailers to manage their stock, and panels brought to marketing key indicators by creating the market share, which is still today an important indicator in marketing. So if we move forward on this timeline, Lucy May?
Yeah, so moving forward to the 1960s, market orientation then emerges as a key concept in marketing, as well as the famous marketing mix. So the 4Ps, you all know: place, price, promotion, and product. And then in the 1980s, marked the creation of the first loyalty programs in the airlines sector and then in the retail sector. Moving forward to the 1990s, research took an interest in the brand, creating the concept of brand equity, meaning building strong brands to win consumer preference and to reduce uncertainty. So it's clear that marketing thus appears as a driver of recovery in high times, exactly like you mentioned, Grégoire. And I think, Thibault, now you're going to take us through the key minds of the marketing.
Yeah, absolutely, because there are 4 academic milestones that really shape the discipline that we wanted to touch on today. The first one is 1960, with a founding article that had been forgotten for many years, to be honest, and which recently was rediscovered, Marketing Myopia, by Theodore Levitt. So we will talk about this. The second critical moment is obviously David Acker. David is obviously very famous for brand equity. So second dimension, second critical milestone of the discipline. Then a couple of years later, relationship marketing with the Nordic School and Christian Grunroth is also a key moment. And more recently, Catherine Lemon and Roland Rust talked about return on marketing, which is obviously a key aspect nowadays. So those are the 4 highlights that we wanted to touch on. To start with, Lucy May, maybe you can take us through Marketing Myopia.
Yep, thank you, Thibault. So indeed, let's talk about Theodore Levitt, who was a professor at Harvard Business School. He was clearly a visionary back in the 60s when it comes to marketing, especially with his famous article, Marketing Myopia. And it's interesting because we kind of forgot about Levitt, but his work is key today, ever more so, during or after a crisis like the one that we're going through currently. His work is even more interesting. Basically, what he says is people are not they're not looking to buy a drill. What they want to do is they want to drill a hole in a wall. So Levitt was actually the very first to differentiate existing hard sales from the bigger picture, which is actual consumer needs. And in other words, what it means is you need to build your market without myopia. And there are no growing markets, but opportunities of growth on specific markets. And right at the center of this is the consumer. So what we're saying here is that an industry should start with a consumer and its needs, and not with a patent or raw goods or an ability to sell. And if we move on to the next slide, I mean, we can really say that Levitt, therefore, was a pioneer of customer orientation. And he's actually a man who loves short and catchy slogans like the one you might know: what business are you really in? And I think that question is key. Are you in mobility, or are you in the railway industry? Are you in the movie industry, or are you in the entertainment industry? If you take the example of Netflix, they used to be a simple video rental shop. And if you look at Netflix today, they're the leader of at-home entertainment industry because they understood consumer needs were more important than hard sales of their existing service, and they were able to innovate. Take the oil and gas industry, also a good example. It's not a question of just finding raw material and distributing it via a refinery. It's looking at consumer needs, creating a service to satisfy that need, delivering satisfaction, and right at the very end, finding the necessary raw material.
Thank you, Lucy May. This is all true, but a couple of years later, Christian Grönros, a Swedish marketing researcher at the Helsinki School of Economics, actually challenged a little bit the vision of the 4 Ps that you mentioned earlier on. And he instead suggested that we should think more of marketing as relationship marketing. So he really suggested a change. And in fact, it's more than a change. It's really a paradigm shift for marketing to move from transactional marketing to relationship marketing. He basically, and all the Nordic school, because back then the Nordics were really keen on researching on services, service marketing, and obviously when you look at service, you look at interactions. When you look at interactions, you look at relationship. So he, Christian Grönros, really asked for a paradigm shift to move from a short to a long-term focus, to move from a marketing mix approach to an interactive marketing approach, with a key focus not so much on outputs, but on interactions. And so looking at a portfolio of relationships on which you don't only measure market share, but really feedback and satisfaction and quality of relationship KPIs over a longer term. So this was a major moment for marketing. And this is really built, we see it next, on an approach of the moments of truth, with someone like Jan Carlson, who was CEO of the Swedish airline back then, national airline, SAS. And really Carlson identified for his airline company and in his book, Moments of Truth, the very moments in a day. He said there were 50,000 of them for an airline like SAS back then, where there was something critical going on between a consumer and his brand SAS. And so he said, we all the SAS employees should focus on making those 50,000 moments of truth so special, so successful. And so that's why we can say today that leveraging relationships with CRM programs, especially in crisis like the one we've just experienced that is going on obviously now, is more critical than ever.
If we move on to our next great minds of marketing, we are slightly moving to what we call now service orientation, and sometimes advocating how powerful is service orientation instead of product orientation could be the project of a lifetime. And this is the case with Kathy Lemon and Roland Rust, that you can see on the right, from Boston College and University of Maryland. Lemon and Rust actually sum up this orientation as presented here. The product scenario is the first one in which firms actually push standardized products to customers and get in return aggregate information such as the profit or the market share, for instance. So a key contribution from Lemon and Rust is actually how most firms, no matter the industry, the sector, or the category you're in, could actually move to a service orientation or a service scenario, as you can see below. So in this type of highly interactive scenario between customers and brands, there is the idea of personalization of the relationship, individual level relationship, and of course, customers' responsiveness in a way. So in other words, how could I develop an active listening of my customers to deliver a service in which product becomes only a simple component of the value proposition. And we have interesting academic cases, Thibault, still taught today at Harvard, for instance, regarding how a firm can move from product to service and leverage relationship in their business model.
Yes, Greg, there's a famous and recent, actually, HBS case, which is called Reinventing Adobe. And it is a great story, to be honest. It not the case of all case studies, but this one I think is really good. It's the story of Adobe. As you all know, Adobe is very well known first for selling softwares to graphic designers. And so they were selling boxed software, pretty much like Dreamweaver, Flash, and Photoshop to creatives and all kinds of creative people. And suddenly, and I'm talking here about 2009, that was just the 10th anniversary of this, suddenly Adobe announced that they were going to acquire Omniture for $1.8 billion just 10 years ago. And that was, if some of you may remember, that was a massive shock because suddenly a company selling boxes, pretty much, or boxed software, were suddenly going to go direct because through Omniture had direct connection. They were experimenting back then software as a service. And so basically they moved, and the whole company, under the direction of the CEO then, who said you can't preserve the status quo forever. That was his way, Shantanu Narayan, to explain this deal. He said it was game changer for both Adobe and for the customers. And what was really game changer, because not everyone understood back then, and it's 10 years later, so we can now better understand, hopefully, what was really new here was that actually Adobe was going from product to service, from software to software as a service, from, you could say, some kind of transactional approach with no data, with a couple of retailers as clients that Adobe didn't know so well, to a huge numbers of clients they were selling directly to with a subscription model. And so this is a total change. You now have data on usage. You now have to manage a huge portfolio of relationships. This is subscriptions, so you have to monitor subscriptions, retention rates, new KPIs, new way to do marketing, new data, new insights on your consumers. So a little bit like Michael Dell did a couple of years before in the software industry when he started the direct sale. In this case for Adobe, it was just huge. And it was truly visionary because it's only 2 years later that Mark Andreessen wrote his famous article, Why Software is Eating the World. So maybe, Greg, yeah, you can now take us a little bit more precisely into this contribution on service research.
Yes, for sure. Thanks, Thibault. If we go back to Lemon and Rust, how should we leverage customer orientation or service orientation? Well, Lemon and Rust actually published in 2004 an article that became one of the greatest contribution to marketing, and their model is still valid today about the return on marketing. So how does it work? On this slide, you have on one side the marketing investments at the very beginning, and at the end, the return on marketing investments. So as you can see here, they conceptualized return on marketing as a positive change in individual customer value. And I think this is key to understand service orientation. So it's all about how every dollar I invest actually changes customers' behavior and purchasing behavior in a way. So it's a matter of causation instead of correlation. And customer equity is actually the sum of individual CLV for customer lifetime value. So it's all about the difference between an increase in customer equity and finally the cost to achieve it. And marketing return on investment is actually becoming the result of attracting, developing, and retaining customers to create and positively impact customer equity. So it's becoming less investment to find maximum responsiveness. So it's why customer equity has been proved to be a key driver for growth and for marketing return on investment.
Yes, thank you, Greg. And it is critical here. It's actually not possible to do another way. It's critical to mention the piece of research, 1994, of Rob Morgan and Shelby Hunt, both of them professors in the US, about relational exchanges and their specific theory on the commitment trust theory of relationship marketing. In their famous article, they first define, and it's a founding definition, they define relationship marketing as all marketing activities aimed at establishing, developing, and maintaining successful relational exchanges. So, so they really say with their theory that in order to have successful relationships, you need two things. You need engagement and you need trust. Engagement, it is the belief that an ongoing relationship with a third party is so important that it justifies maximum effort to maintain it. So we all know what engagement is. In a successful marketing relationship, you need to feel that necessity to actually engage. It is so important that you have to take all possible efforts to maintain it. This is engagement. And trust is when a party has confidence in the reliability and integrity of a trading partner. And it's only if you have both engagement and trust that you're going to have cooperative behaviors. And this is especially true, obviously, for B2B marketing, but this is true as well for many B2C marketing relationships.
Thank you, Thibault. And if we look at Morgan and Hunt, they have three Reboot proposals to generate engagement, which we find are very relevant in today's context. The first one is consolidate the relational benefits. The second one is consolidate the sharing of common values. You have examples on the right which illustrate that. You have brands like Chloe, Bulgari, or Lacoste building communications oriented towards the sharing of common values during the COVID-19 crisis. So take Bulgari, for example, sending a message of unity to support its home native country, Italy, in hard times. Or take Lacoste, sharing that hundreds of employees from their French factories are volunteering to manufacture 145,000 washable and reusable masks to be supplied to shopkeepers and to help them remain safe during a time of crisis like the COVID-19 crisis we are still experiencing. And the third one is avoid opportunistic behaviors. When a consumer perceives an opportunistic behavior from a brand, trust will tend to decrease, and therefore their investment in the relationship will decrease too.
Thank you, Lucie May. It is now impossible, as our last milestone today about the great marketing minds, to not talk about David Acker. David Acker is really the father of brand equity. He's the founding father, I should say. Basically, he says that facing two identical alternatives, the consumer is going to choose the one with the strongest brand equity. And so he defines brand identity as more than just a product. So he says it is product, but it's also organization, it's also brand as a person and brand as a symbol. So those four dimensions of brand identity, product, organization, person, and symbol are going together to really build and shape brand identity. And as Acker says, people will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but they will never forget how you make them feel. And that is the critical concept of brand equity with those four dimensions. Greg, you want to comment on this maybe?
Yes. So how do you measure actually brand equity? Well, actually through Acker scale, which builds around four main items which define strong brands and justify investments to develop such equity. So we can here find awareness as the main key item to drive brand equity, which is the strength of the brand's presence in the consumer's mind. It could be recall or recognition. The second key item to measure strong brands is about loyalty. Loyalty, which has a substantial impact on marketing costs by reducing retention costs and create a higher willingness to pay by consumers. The third key items to measure equity is the perceived quality of the product and the relationship with the brand, with strong causation links with profitability. And the last one is about brand association, that consumers actually had some association and links with the brands. It could include attributes, it could include celebrity endorsement, it may be symbols. In a way, consumers do have association with brands, and strong brands actually develop through great association. So Acker's work actually has a strong legacy, illustrated through the brand equity index, like you can see on the slide, that is published every year, and which is actually a ranking of the strongest brand in the world. So the brands which has the highest brand equity, and is always a great ranking that we should all have a look at as marketers every year.
Thanks, Greg. So it's now already time to reboot. So let's reboot. First, what do we understand about the role of marketing? First thing, it is the guarantee of the long term in the company. Second, define the market without myopia to capture growth opportunities. I think we all understood Lucy May's vision of marketing myopia. Third, building a strong brand equity is actually building image, identity, and associations. And then how does marketing really create value? By developing customer equity, which is the sum of the individual lifetime value of customers, by creating and measuring trust and commitment, so attitudes, and then turning those attitudes into real actions, so behaviors. And by being service oriented, because products are always short term and consumers will stay. So what can they tell us, really, those great marketing minds? That maintaining relationship is more important than ever, I think. That image will probably always precede sales. That there are two major pillars: building trust on one hand and identifying with a brand promise. And that customer equity will be the driving force for the recovery. So attraction, development, and retention to maximize really the return on marketing. So really, as Levitt said, there is no such thing as a growth industry. Companies are organized and operated to create on growth opportunities. This is the key thing. And companies must respond to market requirements. They must think of themselves as satisfiers of customers rather than a producer of goods and services. So remember what Jean-Baptiste said in the beginning. We are not so far away from this after all, a couple of decades after this. So, Greg, do we have questions here? Maybe time for one question?
Yes, we do have one, which is why is customer equity a driver of recovery? So maybe I can take this one. I know it's the tricky part, lemon and rust, and how customer equity may be the driver of the recovery. Customer equity is actually the sum of the value of each customer, and I think this is key. It includes newcomer, but also loyal customers, thanks to retention. So it is therefore the most strategic customers who create the current and the future value, and therefore who actually have the keys of the speed of the recovery. And I think that how fast your heavy customers are coming back should be actually a good indicator of the speed of recovery. And this is probably something we should look at because they hold the key of the long-term profitability and value.
Thank you, Greg, and thank you, Lucy May, for sharing all your thoughts on those great marketing minds. We obviously had to make choices, and we will be back with another marketing reboot very soon, actually. So we hope to have you very, very soon. And thank you so much, Greg and Lucy May.
Thank you, Thibaut. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.